Welcome back to another lecture. Our subject today is Jason Arday's plagiarism and fabrication allegations, his resignation from Cambridge, and his death in August 2026. To frame our discussion, we will examine both the factual record and the conceptual terrain of research integrity and representation in higher education. I'm Professor Alexei.
Hello, I'm Priyanka. Thank you for joining us today.
Let's begin with the foundations. In simpler terms, this story is about a meteoric rise and an abrupt fall. Jason Arday became, in March 2023, Cambridge's youngest black professor and a Fellow of Jesus College. He had a prominent public profile, from BBC programs to major keynotes. Then, in mid-2026, a series of media reports alleged plagiarism in his publications and doctoral thesis, as well as fabrication of elements of research and aspects of his personal narrative. He resigned in early August 2026. He was found dead 9 days later. We can infer that the public conversation, already heated, became more fraught after that point. Now, in more formal terms, research integrity concerns practices such as plagiarism and fabrication. Plagiarism is presenting another's words or ideas as one's own without proper attribution. Fabrication is making up data, quotations, or research processes that did not occur. Autoethnography, which Arday often used, is a legitimate qualitative method connecting the researcher's own experience to broader social meanings. But it still requires accurate citation, ethics approvals when human participants are involved, and verifiable claims. It is worth noting that alleged misconduct can damage individual reputations, institutional trust, and the perceived legitimacy of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, if the case becomes emblematic of broader trends, rightly or wrongly.
Professor, may I ask something simple first? If a listener has never read an academic article, why is a plagiarism allegation so consequential? Why does it go beyond a citation mistake?
Mathematically, think of a proof that depends upon lemmas from others. If you remove or misattribute those lemmas, the proof's validity and the credit structure both collapse. In scholarship, proper attribution is the ledger of ideas. It allocates trust and accountability. When allegations escalate from sloppy citation to systematic copying or fabricated quotes, we move from error to misconduct, which, if substantiated, imperils the work and the appointments built upon it. Moving forward, why does this matter beyond one individual? First, academic standards are a public good. Universities certify knowledge for society. Second, the case intersects with DEI policies at a time when representation is both urgently needed and politically contested. As of 2025, only about 75 academics at Cambridge were black, out of more than 6,000. Arday's appointment carried symbolic weight. When a highly symbolic figure faces integrity allegations, actors on all sides may instrumentalize the case. This can obscure careful, process-based evaluation, and to some extent, affect future hiring climates for minority scholars.
So moving on. Can we ground this with a few basic facts first?
Certainly. First, a general fact. In March 2023, he became Cambridge's youngest black professor and was widely celebrated. His public narrative emphasized lived experience, neurodivergence, and a non-traditional path to academia. Second, the turn. By late July and early August 2026, major outlets reported allegations, ranging from textual overlap in his PhD and articles to duplicated quotations, missing ethics approvals, and a falsely stated funding source. Cambridge and Jesus College announced inquiries in early August 2026. He resigned the same month and was found dead 9 days later. No further details are in the record we are using here. Two chronological points help frame the arc. 1. The 2023 appointment was already a milestone. It aligned with institutional commitments to equality and inclusion, with the appointment board chaired by Sally Morgan. 2. The 2026 cascade was unusually rapid. Online claims in July were followed by national press coverage, and within days, institutional investigations and his resignation. Parallel reviews at other universities were initiated. Along the way, there were earlier signals. A 2018 article of his received a correction in December 2023 after overlap concerns. And in 2025, a Times higher education reporter compiled a 63-page investigation that did not publish, reportedly due to legal risk, with police involvement later acknowledged as mistaken by the Met Commissioner.
And Professor, the thesis was disputed too, right?
Yes. It is worth noting that Liverpool John Moores University stated it reviewed complaints about his 2015 PhD and found no plagiarism, while media reports in 2026 allege significant overlap with earlier work. Supporters circulated an open letter, arguing he was being smeared, and some signatories later withdrew as further details emerged. We observe, then, a contested evidentiary space pending the outcomes of institutional inquiries. Before we get to the complexities, a brief personal note. In research, the temptation to move quickly is perennial. In my own group years ago, we paused a paper for 6 months over 2 ambiguous citations and an unclear ethics memo. It felt slow. It saved the project. The bureaucracy of integrity is in practice the scaffolding of trust. It is not glamorous. It is indispensable. Next, let's explore 3 big questions. One historical, one counterfactual, and one present-day problem that remains unresolved. The aim is not to litigate each allegation here, but to understand the structures around them.
Professor Alexei, may I ask, why was Arday's appointment to Cambridge so significant in 2023?
It's crucial to understand the demographic and symbolic context. With only about 75 Black academics among more than 6,000 at Cambridge in 2025, any senior appointment carried disproportionate emblematic force. Institutions were and are under pressure, morally warranted in my view, to improve representation and reform cultures that have excluded talent. Arday's profile dovetailed with these strategic aims. He spoke across media, advised national bodies, and wrote on race and higher education, often through autoethnography. Supporters framed his lived experience as an epistemic asset that could enrich the discipline and its institutions. Critics countered that, for a chair at Cambridge, a comparatively slim conventional research record raised questions about due diligence and criteria. In this context, both PR and DEI politics were inevitably entangled with academic assessment.
Professor, could you clarify how his personal narrative influenced the appointment? Was it simply background or part of the scholarly case?
Personal narrative functioned as both context and arguably method. He publicly described having no formal sociology training, positioning himself instead as an expert by lived experience, which aligned with his autoethnographic stance. This made his story central to his approach. It also traveled well in university communications and the media, reinforcing the sense that he could catalyze cultural change. He held visible advisory roles, delivered keynotes even beyond academia, for example, to funeral directors in 2024 and insurers in 2025, and appeared on BBC platforms. In principle, narrative can illuminate structures of inequality, but as hiring criteria, narrative must complement rather than substitute for demonstrable scholarly rigor, transparent methods, and verifiable claims. The tension between symbolism and standards sat at the core of the appointment's historical significance.
What if Cambridge had conducted exhaustive verification in 2023, like a full audit of publications, ethics approvals, visiting titles, and biographical claims before the offer?
Counterfactually, several outcomes are plausible. First, an exhaustive pre-appointment verification could have surfaced issues earlier, such as the 2018 paper that was later corrected, discrepancies in visiting professorships reported by some institutions, or questions around ethics approvals and funding statements noted in 2026 coverage. This might have led to a delayed or conditional appointment with remediation plans, or a different selection altogether. Second, early transparency could have reduced the 2026 shock cycle, lowering the temperature of culture war interpretations and protecting both the individual and the institution from a crisis atmosphere. Third, the signal to the sector might have been salutary, that representation goals would be pursued in tandem with rigorous verification, thereby strengthening rather than weakening public confidence in DEI commitments.
Professor, what might have been different in the wider academic landscape if that verification had happened then?
We observe at least three probable differences. 1. Fewer collateral effects on Black scholars who now fear increased suspicion. Early, procedural clarity tends to prevent the unfair generalizations that follow public scandals. 2. Institutional reforms, such as standardized pre-hire integrity checks, independent verification of credentials, and mandatory ethics audit trails for qualitative research, might have been adopted calmly rather than reactively. 3. Media dynamics could have shifted. The 2025 Times Higher Education investigation was reportedly deterred by legal risk. If universities had already established robust verification, journalism would likely have focused on policy rather than personality. In simpler terms, the system could have learned without the spectacle.
What are the unresolved issues regarding DEI policies today, especially after a case like this?
Several tensions remain unresolved. First, balancing representation with rigor. We must design hiring criteria that recognize diverse pathways and methods while maintaining hard-nosed verification of claims, publications, and ethics compliance. Second, narrative and evidence. Institutions should value lived experience, but not outsource due diligence to it. Personal stories must be presented with the same evidentiary care as any scholarly assertion. Third, governance versus PR. Communications should follow verification, not precede it. Otherwise, reputational incentives can bias decision-making. Fourth, legal risk and press freedom. Heavy reliance on aggressive legal responses can chill valid scrutiny. The 2025-2026 sequence shows how delayed accountability can amplify inevitable crises.
Professor Alexei, what further research is needed? Where should scholars and administrators focus next?
To elaborate, 5 areas suggest themselves. 1. Impact evaluations of DEI hiring frameworks, comparing outcomes under different verification regimes. This requires linked administrative data and careful causal inference. 2. Qualitative standards in autoethnography, clearer norms on ethics approvals, quotation archiving, and audit trails, so that first-person scholarship is both humane and verifiable. 3. Institutional due diligence, development of pre-appointment integrity checklists, including publication verification, credential confirmation, and third-party reference triangulation. 4. Research integrity communication. Experiments on how to frame corrections and inquiries to minimize chilling effects on underrepresented groups while maximizing trust. 5. Legal environment studies. Measuring how defamation threats and complaints to authorities affect investigative reporting. Transparency here would help balance reputational protection with the public interest. In conclusion, the research program is not punitive, it is infrastructural.
It makes me wonder whether a standardized pre-hire integrity pack could become normal. Publications, ethics approvals, and verifications bundled and reviewable by committees before interviews. Maybe that is dull paperwork, but it might save pain later.
Arguably, dull paperwork is the quiet hero of institutional life. Like the pawn structure in chess, unglamorous yet decisive. Trust but verify, and document the verification. To summarize, Arday's case highlights core issues of research integrity: plagiarism, fabrication, ethics approvals, and how they intersect with representation and public narratives. We considered why his appointment in 2023 was historically significant. We explored the counterfactual of exhaustive verification and its possible benefits. And we outlined today's unresolved tensions in DEI policy and academic standards, with directions for further study. For those who wish to read more, work on academic ethics and the design of DEI policy frameworks provides the necessary methodological tools. In conclusion, thank you for joining us today. Continue to question and explore in your studies.
Thank you, Professor.